All right, I think we got everybody but Mr. Smith, so we can go ahead and get started. So we're going to start this evening just looking at the agenda, and for the sake of time, as we've done before, if you all don't mind or you don't have any objections, I think we'll just open it up for any discussions that you may have, as opposed to going through this thing by line item. So I know I've got a couple, but anybody? Go ahead, Dr. Highlander.
I don't have it in front of me. I haven't opened my computer yet. I believe it's 9F1, I believe, under consent agenda. I'd like to see the contract on that. I'm not saying I'm against it, but I'd like to see the contract on that.
Are you talking about the addendum to the
Yes.
approved instructional support contract?
Yes.
Okay. Dr. Highlander had a question about Roman numeral 9, F1. I think that was underneath Mrs. Bronson, the addendum to the approved instructional support contract.
I'm not necessarily against it. I just like to see the contract on it. Okay, thank you. I just want to look at it before we vote on Thursday.
I know. We'll move it out a little bit. We'll do that next time.
You got one, Ms. Thurman?
Yeah, the fees, I had it marked down, but I don't see it, I don't have it right here before me, I haven't got my computer up yet. The fees, where are the fees on here?
Well,
Sheridan?
that's the sheet that I just gave you,
Yeah.
but there's going to be some changes to it.
Okay,
But that is what I just gave you.
yeah, okay.
Do you all know offhand which item that is? Oh, it's 9-4A.
Yeah, there it is, okay. Okay, I just had a question here. It said the attached list of fees does not include fees for general instruction or class fees for core content areas. I didn't think we could charge fees for general instruction.
We don't. So that's saying it's not. If you remember, maybe 2 years ago, when there were a bunch of
Yeah.
fees for general instruction,
Yeah.
we went in and gave a per pupil
Okay, well,
amount. So there's not any general instruction fees.
Okay, well, that's why I was wondering. I thought we did away with those.
Correct.
But it says it does not include them. I thought, well, are they somewhere else? Or
No,
somewhere?
no,
Okay,
they're not. We give the school the allocation based on their number of students.
I just wanted to be sure the way that this reads, I just wanted to be sure that that was not the case. Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Mrs. Robinson.
Yeah, I just had a clarification question on 9C3A item, where are you? 5.201, learning camps. That's a REACH, right? The learning camps that
Yeah,
the funding, is that the REACH program?
Give me just a second to verify, because I'm
Okay.
just following you on here. 9C.
Yeah, look for file 5.201, learning camps fiscal year 21 budget.
I'm old school, so I've got a stack of papers in front of me.
I cannot help you. I don't know. I don't know.
Give me just a minute.
I don't know. I just assumed this is the REACH program. I just wanted to make sure I
Yeah, I'm gonna
understood.
confirm for you, but yes. What's there?
This is under budget amendments?
Yeah, correct, it is.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, great.
All right. Anyone else? I'll give you a chance to look a little bit more. Dr. Robertson, would you just explain quickly? I know you had talked with me on the phone about this, but the McConnell re-roof. Just trying to explain to the board what's going on there.
Yes, sir. So that was a early emergency approval that requested a couple weeks ago. If you'll recall, we approved phase 1 of McConnell re-roof. And as the contractor got involved in the work, it was just way worse than we thought it was. There were pictures of holes that were going all the way down into the building. And so from an emergency standpoint, felt like it was necessary. And we already had plans going into next budget to do the completion of that roof. So we went ahead and kept the contractor on, asked for emergency approval so they could just go ahead and get it done. And, again, ran into some unexpected issues with the condition of that roof and just felt like it was necessary to take care of it immediately rather than wait.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Mrs. Hill.
Justin, tell us about this sinkhole. Middle Valley Elementary.
So in the parking lot of Middle Valley Elementary, a sinkhole opened up that was, I think it was about 12 feet wide. It was a pretty significant sinkhole. And again, from just a safety standpoint, felt like we had to take care of that immediately, which is why we asked for the emergency approval. It was right on the corner of the parking lot, so it wasn't ever a danger to anyone. However, obviously something we needed to address.
Yeah.
Thought about making a swimming pool.
Duck pond.
Digging it out. Have a swim team.
All right, anything else there that you see on the agenda? No, there's a lot there. Go ahead, Mrs. Thurman.
Yeah, these new position requests, are we paying, I don't have, like I said, I'm having a terrible time here.
Yeah, it's ESOL and driver transportation support. ESER 2, they are, for that period of time. And with ESOL, one of the things we've had with our English learners is over the last probably 3 years, we've been working, or really since I've been here, we've been working to get in alignment to what the state expects as far as staffing. So we've gotten pretty close this year. I think we had to add a couple, 3 more to get in compliance. So we're there, but what we've seen and continue to see is a concentration of that population to a certain subset of schools. And so trying to work on that transition, as we've talked about, trying to improve student achievement. So Welcome Center, Marshall team worked closely on that. And then Justin, feel free to talk about the transportation piece, but both out of ESER 2.
Transportation piece, obviously related to COVID, one of the struggles that we've had in terms of contact tracing is transportation and contact tracing on buses. So this position will support that effort and at the same time also just support overall safety on our school buses, pulling videos, monitoring speed, things of that nature. But this year, and I think Jen maybe would nod in agreement that contact tracing on buses has been way more difficult than contact tracing in schools. Even with school buses that have seating charts, kids aren't always going to sit where they're supposed to. And so we're having to pull video and go through and contact trace using the videos.
Mr. Press.
So on both of the positions, but just remind me, ESER 2 covers for 1 year or 3 years?
2023.
Up to 2023?
2 is 2023, 3 is 2024.
Okay, and so obviously one of the things we're going to want to see, at least in the case of the ESOL instructor or Welcome Center, is some sort of metric to see its effectiveness, because we're either going to have to decide then to continue this, or so can we in such a short period of time be able to measure the effectiveness of a role like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, there are quantitative components to answer your question, but it is a compressed period of time. So there'll definitely be some qualitative components as well. Marsh and her team and Diego, who leads our ESOL work, we're looking at how students are integrated into schools and are supported as they come. So we'll have some level of measurement. I mean, everything we try to implement, we've spent in this room right here, probably, 12, 15 hours over the last couple of weeks trying to nail down how we're measuring, how we're making sure that any investment, so to speak, that we make, to your point, that we can
Yeah.
measure its effectiveness.
So
to
especially
ensure-
that one, because it's compressed, then we're gonna have to prove something in a very quick amount of time if you come back a year or two from now and say, we need this position permanent. So let me just encourage you in that, however we can do that.
Dr. Highlander, did you have something?
I do, just briefly. We've discussed this before, but the ESSER positions, they do realize that while they may continue, they're absolutely not guaranteed beyond the 2023.
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
Being
Thank
very
you.
clear with that. Penny and team, a great
That
job
was
being,
kind of a follow-up what Mr. Perez said.
absolutely, very, very clear with that.
And hopefully, funding's there, and if they're needed, that's fine, but
Yep.
just, we don't want to let them think that it's a permanent position.
Yeah, and I think to the point, to both you all's point, a big part of anything that's added, whether it's programmatic, capital, anything we do with these funds, like the proof points are important, the evidence is important that it is effective. Because, in all truth, and I would think about if I was coming into one of these roles as a ESSER, funded, I'd be trying to make it really hard 2-3 years from now for, us to say we can't figure it out, even if it means we've got to dig into our current budget and cut something else. You know what I mean? Like that's what some of this is about. So, yeah, to both of your points, that's a big point of conversation.
Mrs. Hill?
Mine is about the differentiated pay plan, so if anybody else has questions about those other two, I can wait.
Anybody got one?
Okay.
Let me real quick.
Yeah.
Ms. Houghton, did you want to say something about the school fees?
Yeah, the only change was changing the parking fees over to the debt column, so we just changed the column from what was originally presented.
And is that what the amendment is about?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So what you have in front of you that Ms. Ford passed out, that's what she's referring to. I think that's in the fourth paragraph there. The attached list includes a standardized fee for parking that's been moved to the debt column.
So this item is already on the agenda, and what you have before you tonight will be replacing what is currently on the agenda, because it has been updated.
So what do you mean, the debt column? Like, we're not counting it as, I'm looking for debt on here. Does that mean
So
we're
if you
not-
see there's a debts, and I don't know, you want to jump in?
No, I don't see
Oh,
the
not-
debt.
It's on the spreadsheet. So the parking was in the general fees column.
In the last column.
Right up there,
Oh, okay.
very top. Your eyes don't naturally go to it because you're looking at the categories.
So what did, we used to call that a fee, and now we call it a debt?
Yes, it was in the general fees column, and Scott
So is
pointed out
that-
it should be in the debts column.
Is that to make us feel better because everybody had different prices? And we had Tucker.
Are you talking specifically about parking? Okay, and I apologize, for some reason over here, one of the speakers, I guess, is muted, I can't quite hear what's going on. So, Ms. Hill, to your question about the parking fee, we call it a parking fee, but because it's something that the school system can require students to pay, it's legally treated as a debt. The difference between a fee and a debt is, really, it makes no sense, so forget what you understand about the word fee and the word debt, and follow along for a minute. A fee is something that you can charge to offset the cost of providing something that's for a credit or that occurs during the regular school day. You can charge it, but you cannot require payment. Okay, so that's what we call a fee. It's something that you can ask for, but you cannot demand. A debt is something that you can demand. And so it's tied to something that is either outside of the regular school day say like extracurricular athletics, or a field trip that is outside of the regular school day that is not tied to a class for credit, or in this case, parking. It could also be library fines, things like that. You can charge for those things, and you can require a kid to pay those things. So parking, we say it's a parking fee, so that's why, very logically, finance, we put it under general fees, because it says in the name, it's a fee, right? Except that for reasons that are too complicated to explain, the state board says, no, really, it's a debt.
Okay, all right. I won't belabor that. Thank you. Okay, so differentiated pay plan. Beginning to study this, I noticed that you all are starting to use some terminology that I'm not familiar with, I don't think, within the context of Hamilton County Schools. I want to understand what your thoughts are, if it's part of this overall equity language. You're calling some schools promise schools that have greater than 97% super subgroup or priority status, and then hope schools. Can you talk to me about that?
Penny, you want to?
So, the promise schools are really, Jenny, what you probably have thought of in the past as priority schools. And so we are looking at them based on percent economically disadvantaged in the subgroup.
And so this is language that you guys are going to begin using as part of just Hamilton County Schools vernacular?
So just,
For
well,
us to-
let's be clear. I think from the HR work standpoint, a bit of it's semantics, to be really honest, but we're not calling them priority schools. It's semantics. It's really more for their framing in regards to how they look at differentiated pay.
But so will that become part of our language within Hamilton County Schools, that we talk about our promise schools and our hope schools? That
For differentiated pay.
Yes.
but only for, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's only used in HR? I think it's.
Correct, for differentiated.
What are the Hope schools then? If
They
promise is
are,
priority?
they're at 78%.
No, I mean, what are they? What do we call them now? I mean, if promise.
They're just not.
If priority schools were promise schools.
They're just not-
Yeah, we're just updating a definition,
Correct.
and we're labeling it that way so we can just have a shorthand.
Well, what do we call it now?
We don't, because we don't have a tier of differentiated pay that applies to those schools. So that was the updated language to show that we are updating and adding this tier for Hope schools, which are the schools that are above that 77%, I think it was, the super subgroup, and then the schools that are above 98%, which are largely, as Penny said, schools that you know as priority schools, but there are other schools in that category. I do think we detail them in the differentiated comp, so there's a
Yeah.
few
Right.
more. We only have 9 priority schools. I think there are 13 schools that are promise schools.
And they're detailed in that document, Ms. Thurman. So Bestie, Shepherd, Brown Middle, DuPont, Eastridge Elementary, Eastridge High, Eastridge Middle, Harrison Elementary, Howard Connect, Spring Creek, Brown Academy, Tyner Academy, and Tyner Middle.
I
So
just
those are the
didn't know
Hope.
if it was a group that we had now, we were just calling something else.
No.
Okay, thank you.
So
Mr. President.
to that as well, if we approve this, I think perhaps an assumption that we have to monitor and be cautious of is that the turnover will be mitigated by pay, right? But the risk of that is to not look into other areas within the school that might be provoking some of that turnover, right? So we need to, I tend to not think that exclusively pay is why people choose a school, and I'd just be afraid of us, and I know that sounds like, but of not really digging deep into what are some of the other factors that are leading to turnover, so that we can increase the
Right.
success.
So I can talk to that as well. We complete exit interviews. We also go around and host focus groups with our teachers. We have a lot of teachers that we have defined in those schools as irreplaceables. So if they leave, it's detrimental to the school building. And so we meet regularly with those folks. I actually went out to a school myself last week to meet with teacher leaders to see what would encourage you to stay or come back. So we know it's more than just pay, absolutely.
All right, anything else? All right, I've got just a quick question. Dr. Robertson, on the Mechatronics Academy, that's still at the Volkswagen campus, is that right?
It's still at the Volkswagen campus, and the language in the contract hasn't changed. It obviously aligns to Future Ready 2023 in terms of Future Ready graduates and making sure that we're preparing kids post-secondary. So it's been a very successful program and one that all three partners agree should continue.
Right, any other questions about the agenda?
So with the board matters, under board policy 6.409, the child abuse and neglect policy, in a conversation with Mary DeCamp earlier today, she noted that we had not referenced legal references under this, so she did provide me with those 5 that I will add and bring to the board on Thursday, as well as she had some other recommendations for some terminology, and I think that Scott was going to recommend that terminology, or I do have it here. Scott, which one would you prefer?
Practice here. We'll circulate that to the board so you can review it.
Thank you.
Basically what it does is it brings the reporting requirements more closely in line to what the General Assembly did in the previous legislative session. And it also clarifies, I think, in language that our teachers will easily understand who they have to report to and when.
And since that's first read, like, what are the mechanics around that, Scott? So as long
Well,
as you get
exactly
us
what we
that
do.
before Thursday to be able to look
Yeah.
over.
Since it's first read, there's nothing incumbent on us to do beforehand, but I think it's a good practice for the board to see these things and to have a written record of it and chew on it, because, it may make perfectly good sense to Dr. Drake and to me and Mary, but, someone on the street, these policies are written, first in Nashville and then looked at by us. But if it doesn't make sense to a parent or to a teacher, it doesn't do us any good. So I think we're going to try to push it out as quickly as we can so y'all can chew on it and think about it.
Okay. All right, anything else there? All right, then I think we will move to our next item here, which will be our presentation of the transition that's going to take place this summer with our custodial services.
So I want to take just a quick minute to update you. So Val Emery, the division vice president from SSC that you guys have met before, is agreed to come in and give us a quick update on where we are with the transition plans going in the summer, and then take some questions from there. So I'll turn it over to Val.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Hope everybody's doing well. Last time I was here was a bit of a different circumstance, so I thought it was appropriate to share where we were and some of the things that we talked about, and really on a high-level plan as we go into the beginning of our transition. Bit of a staffing update. This has actually changed since last week when we pulled these numbers together. Our hiring goal for housekeeping is about 336 FTEs. We're currently at 355, so we've met that goal and exceeded that intentionally. Out of those 355 FTEs, 334 have transitioned from the current provider over to SSC. From a ground standpoint, our goal is 20. Although we didn't transition, City Green has, as of today, 15 FTEs. So he's very confident, as we are, that we'll be able to meet the goal of 20 FTEs. Just a reminder for our organizational chart, and wanted to introduce you guys to Shimshan Racine. He's our resident regional Director of Operations. He's the person that will be here on site, actually moved this week, in the process of moving. City Green's team is already in place. We've hired our admin assistant, warehouse manager will be on site in a few weeks. The to be determined in North River and Rock Point have actually cleared background checks as of today, so we're fully staffed. I've given instruction to Shimshan and team to hire an additional manager just to be sure that we meet the full complement of needs. As you well know, we're expecting ample one this summer, so it's going to be a pretty busy summer. In my world, we call it a fun summer, so we want to make sure that the team's ready and prepared. Again, really high-level look of our summer clean plan. We have 5 of these for each learning community. Don't be fooled by the simplistic look. There's a lot of detail behind these tasks that will be completed. Shimshan and Dr. Robinson and Justin Witt have been meeting on a regular basis to talk about construction and those type of things that we need to be aware of this summer. Over the next 2 weeks, Shimshan and team will finalize the plan with our point of contacts. Each building has a point of contact so that everyone will know where we are and when we're supposed to be there and when to expect us to be done. We've also are well aware of the summer school schedule and the 41 or so schools that will be hosting summer school, so we're in the process of finalizing this schedule. This to me is one of the most exciting of them all. As a company, I'd urge you to check out hamiltonfacilities.com. It's our website that is live as we speak. It will have two pieces to the website. As you see on the top, there'll be some pages that are open to everyone, meaning general public. Talks about our team, who we are, who the unit directors are, and contact information. Nuga News, which is, for those of you that remember in our presentation, we talked about doing some internships and that type of thing for students. That will be housed there. And then very easy contact information for us. School board only and point of contact access will hold the meeting news. So today, this presentation will be uploaded onto the site for those in this room to be able to access. Our leadership info, specifically unit directors and supervisors within buildings, so everyone will know who's where. And then our electronic logbook will also be housed on this website. When you go into the electronic logbook, this is actually our login page. Each point of contact will have a login, as well as folks in this room, to be able to make requests for things such as trash was missed, or need mulch, or got to branch out, can somebody come clean it? This will actually be monitored real time by the unit directors and help facilitate that in-between communication between the unit directors, the building points of contact, and Shimshan, so he's not receiving a call every time there's an issue. We'll also be able to track and trend this and use this as training material, and be able to improve service at the school level real time. We've made a big investment in the partnership in terms of billboards. This is actually a real, I believe they're 53-foot billboards, thank you. The ones you see on the interstate. We've got 5 of them that are starting to go up this week and will be up through the summer. Just saying, hey, we're here, we want to hire, we are interested in the community, and come check us out. Check hamiltonfacilities.com out, and there'll be links to apply and all of that kind of thing on this for both our partners, City Green and Mean Green. we wanted to intentionally keep these from going up until after we had a significant amount of folks transition from the current provider. And then finally, excuse me, our performance expectations will be housed on the electronic logbook. So you will be able to go in at the building level and see what is supposed to be getting done per the contract specs for both excuse me, grounds and janitorial. Really quickly, week 1, go live. That very first week is going to be a flurry of activity to include training for all of the staff in a very regimented fashion that will be both technical and hands-on. Delivery of all new equipment that will start arriving the week of the 24th to the warehouse. And Justin has also provided us with some satellite warehouse space so that we can disperse that stuff pretty quickly. Currently, I'll have 15 startup and training, our stat team members on site through June, through the end of June, and 8 bench managers to support every manager within a learning community. Again, we've got a lot to do, and we want to make sure that there's a lot of support out there for the associates doing the work. And finally, this week, we will have assessed all buildings to put our facility condition assessment together, which is the baseline of our action plan. Bridge Refugee Services, we're reaching out to as well for local contacts, so more to come on that as we make some contact. Any questions? Short and painless.
Val, can you talk a little bit on the log entry about what happens after 24 hours
Sure.
if the item isn't addressed? And for the board, one of the things that Shimshan and I have been talking about, the points of contact at schools, is trying to retrain our staff instead of immediately going to Shimshan to utilize the log entry book and utilize the unit directors so that we're getting items addressed immediately instead of bypassing the process.
Yeah, there's built-in escalation within the logbook. So as an example, my trash was missed today. That email will go directly to the unit director over that particular building. They have 24 hours to respond, take care of the need and close out the work order, if you will. If that doesn't happen within 24 hours, it gets kicked up to his level. And we also have metrics in line to track who's doing what and what kind of requests we're getting. Ultimately, if it should get to the point that Shimshan doesn't respond, it does get kicked up to me. So we'll have all hands on deck.
I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on what contributed to your hiring success?
A couple of things. I don't want to take away from the fact that the folks that are working want to work. They've been really excited about transition and access to chemicals and supplies and training and support. But we've also put a lot of time and effort into making sure that we're available for them. We found out early on in our first session that we needed some additional weeks. So we talked with HR and we brought some additional folks down and had multiple hiring sessions for the internal folks. And we've had 6 job fairs to date for the external folks. And moving forward, we're going to have virtual job fairs every Monday.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Glad to have you here as an employer. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, you guys good? Thank you very much.
Yep, absolutely.
Appreciate your time. All right. I think that will, unless anybody's got anything else, that will adjourn us. Go ahead, Dr. Holland.
I have a limited number of cartons of eggs and sausage in the back room if anyone would like to partake.
I thought Scott was going to address some legal issues the rest of the night, no?
Go ahead.
Critical race theory or something, what they're doing in the legislature, I thought you said. I say we're not going to discuss it, you just said, I thought we were going to discuss it, no?
I sent an email out to the board earlier this afternoon. So the question's about the critical race theory bill. So when I sent up to the board in some, is that it really doesn't affect anything that Hamilton County Schools does. What it says simply is that you cannot teach concepts that are predicated upon assumptions that are driven by race recognition. It doesn't mean that you cannot teach academic concepts, and in my memo, go on to explain a couple of examples that kind of jump out from the statute. So there's really nothing in the statute that affects anything that we do. And most especially, I want to be clear, it has no impact whatsoever on this board's recently adopted equity policy. So this board, y'all will recall, spent some time discussing the fact that certain groups in Hamilton County Schools do not perform on par with other groups. This board adopted a policy that asked the administration to examine that situation and develop recommendations intentionally designed to address whatever those root causes are. There is nothing in the particular statute that would impact that even slightly. So yeah, if you have any questions, after you read my email, if you have any questions about
I came straight from work here, so I hadn't.
yeah, it's what it boils down to is there are about 7, 8, or 9 things that the General Assembly says don't teach these things, and these are basic concepts. Let's see if I can pull it up real fast. These are basic concepts that, frankly, the school system doesn't teach anyway. The critical race theory language that they're targeting really builds itself around a notion that people behave a certain way because of race, or have certain moral authority because of race, or the reverse being true. And frankly, our existing policies speak against that. So I think actually when you read the way the statute is written, it's really more of a political statement than it is something that would affect Hamilton County Schools. Now, obviously, I think the General Assembly was concerned about maybe some ways that other systems might have been looking at things, but I mean, honestly, it's not something that I think will impact our operations even slightly. I think maybe some curriculum people can comment on that if we choose, but take a quick look at the statute. I actually excerpted. It's a ridiculously long statute because it starts to look at a bunch of things involving. Let's see, the powers of the State Board of Education, licensure, and at section 51 of the statute, they start talking about critical race theory. And it was sort of like an oh, by the way, school systems can't teach this, that, or the other. And by and large, we're not doing it anyway. It was kind of an afterthought, but take a look at it, and I think what you'll find is, well, we're not doing that, we're not doing that, we're not doing that. Now, I can see how somebody might look at some of those prohibitions and might think, well, gosh, that kind of makes it hard to teach this aspect of history, or maybe to teach about this work of literature. But the statute goes on to say that there's nothing wrong with teaching historical fact or developing these issues as long as you do it with an even-handed approach. So, again, take a look at the email that I wrote, take a look at the statute, and if you have any questions, I'm sure that the chair can make time for us to talk about it on the record. Between now and then, I'll be happy to comment on them. But I really don't think you're going to find that it has practical impact here in Hamilton County.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Robinson?
Yeah, I did read the bill. I read it on Saturday night when I emailed you all, or whatever day that was. And you really can quickly go to the bill and jump straight to the portion. It's basically the end of the bill. I know I'm not a lawyer, so forgive me if
That
this is a
probably
big-
means you have more common sense than I do, so go
I
ahead.
didn't want to say that, you did, but frankly, like whenever I read the policy, and I do read a lot of policy because I'm a board member, we all read a lot of policy, I actually felt like the language could be interpreted poorly for any school district. And my issue, or sorry, what I'm concerned about and how it relates to how it overall impacts the district, there are multiple reasons why I'm concerned. from a fiduciary position, it says that they can take away our funding if we are, let's say, accused of something that the General Assembly doesn't care for within this language or this bill. And there's zero outline of what is to actually hold someone accountable, or not even, basically, how are they supposed to regulate us in anything like this, first of all? But then I think the worst issue that I'm seeing is the worst case scenario, which is what, we get accused of something that they don't like within this language, and then our funding is paused while what, we fight it out and we defend ourselves. I mean, this actually feels like a really big deal to me for a lot of reasons. But again, from a policy and fiduciary position, this could, I mean, they could choose to try to prevent us having funding from the state level.
From that perspective,
that's a
Ms.
big
Robinson,
deal.
that feels like an overreach, doesn't it?
It's absolutely an overreach.
So you've leapt over the thou shalt not issues to the question of what happens if. That's a great question. So if you're looking at section C I'm sorry, it's paragraph C of section 51, and on the primer that I sent you, it's in the very last page. It reads that the Commissioner of Education finds that an LEA or public charter school knowingly violated this section, then the Commissioner shall withhold state funds in an amount determined by the Commissioner from the LEA or the public charter school until the LEA or public charter school provides evidence to the Commissioner that the LEA or public charter school is no longer in violation of this section. So it feels like a taking, an unconstitutional taking. And I would suggest, and I haven't spoken to Christy Ballard, who's the attorney for the Commissioner, but I would suggest that more likely than not, if they feel like there is a problem, what they're going to do is first send a letter and inquire. And if there's not compliance or an explanation, I feel like before they would impose this, they would have a hearing before the state board, because that's just basic due process. And then subsequently, I feel like then there would be this fine imposed. So I understand exactly your concern, because you're looking at what's the mechanism question. And it's a great question. And I would say that the statute doesn't spell out that mechanism, but basic constitutional due process would suggest that before they would take funds from the students of Hamilton County, they would follow the process that they would ordinarily follow in similar situations and conduct a hearing. And even that would be after they would first inquire, hey, what's going on here? So you're right, the statute's silent about those protections. So I have to read into it what I'm sure that they intended. I think if you look further up at subsection B, the things that you can do, well, those are things that we're doing. You can use teach or use supplemental instruction materials that include the history of an ethnic group, an impartial discussion of controversial aspects of history, the impartial instruction of the historical oppression of a particular group of people. That's a can. Historical documents relevant to those things. Those are all things that are entirely permissible. If you look up at subsection A, that's what speaks to the things that you cannot do. So you can't teach or promote the following concepts: that one race or sex is inherently superior to another race or sex. We would agree that we don't do that, and you shouldn't do that. You can't promote that an individual, by virtue of the individual's race or sex, is inherently privileged or inherently racist or sexist or oppressive, whether consciously or subconsciously. So you're talking about someone's character on the basis of the race or sex. We would agree that you can't do that. And you go on throughout these lists, and I think as a rule, we can all agree with these concepts, that we wouldn't be doing these things and shouldn't be doing these things. Now, as I mentioned in my email, there are a couple of things here where I think it could hang up an educator, quite frankly. And I'll give you an example. So, let's see, 6, paragraph 6. An individual should feel discomfort, guilt, anguish, or another form of psychological distress solely because of that individual's race or sex. Now, someone who's maybe teaching the adventures of Huckleberry Finn, might say, well, wait a minute. One of the points that Mark Twain is making in that book is about the racism of society. And so so Mark Twain actually uses the plight that Jim suffers to critique the whites in the book. And so someone might look at this statute and say, well, wait a second, that means I can't teach the adventures of Huckleberry Finn the way that I've been teaching it for all of these years. And so I'd say, well, wait. Look at the language of 6. It says, an individual should not feel discomfort, guilt, anguish, or another form of psychological distress solely because of the individual's race or sex. And so I think the point, if you're teaching Huck Finn, as an example, is the reader isn't supposed to feel discomfort because he or she is white, but should feel discomfort because of the injustice that Jim is experiencing. And this is just obviously one example of literature that I kind of came up with on the fly. So, but the point there is that a teacher who is teaching higher order thinking and is trying to get his or her students to think about concepts of racial injustice can do it without making the students feel bad because of who they are or the color of their skin. So I think it may require our folks to think about the curriculum and be certain that they're approaching it the right way, but I don't think there's anything inherently problematic with the statute. I think it's a political statement that was sort of like ready, shoot, aim, because again, this was introduced in the wee hours of the legislative session, the wee hours. But I think it does a pretty good job of explaining, this is what you shouldn't do, but we're not doing it anyway. Here's what you can do, and that's what we are doing. And I think if we just understand it from that perspective, it should be business as usual. The thing I think this board needs to bear in mind, and certainly the folks at Hamilton County Schools need to bear in mind, is that this does not disturb this board's equity policy. This preserves intact the important work this board has been doing to try to explore why do we have these achievement gaps? Why do they exist, and what can we do to tackle those problems and bring all the resources of this board to bear to address those? So I think the General Assembly's waded into an issue that maybe isn't a problem here in Hamilton County. And so my advice to this board and everyone else would be, we probably shouldn't assume that this is relevant to our current conversation.
And Mrs. Robinson, I will say just from my short experience here that it's not unheard of for the state to enact a mandate or legislation that they don't have some end game for. It's not the first time. So, all right, we got it. We got anything else?
Can I ask,
Mr. Thurman?
on Thursday night, I want an update about the mask mandate for the students, that where we're going to be after school's out, for school-age childcare this summer. Lots of questions about that. We need to find out where everybody on the board stands, what we're going to do about that.
I think Dr. Johnson put something out.
Dr. Johnson did send something out, but it's very vague.
June 1, no masks are a choice.
It's all
Student or
optional,
teacher.
but that didn't know if that goes for school-age childcare or not. I don't know.
That's everybody.
It's everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we need to get that out there for the parents to know, because since I'm District 1 school board member, I get a lot of calls about this because I'm the first one on the list. I want to be sure everybody knows about that. And also, I have asked for this in the past, and we used to never have to ask for this. We used to get it on a bi-monthly basis. We used to get the enrollment numbers. It used to be about bi-monthly or at least once a month, that we would get enrollment numbers broken down by grade, by school grade and race. And I would like to see those numbers, please.
That's not a problem. Since the last 4 years I've been here,
Because, I mean, it used to be on a big spreadsheet. It was very easy to read, and we could kind of track where the enrollment where the enrollment numbers are going, what grades have dropped off in our schools and things like that. And we haven't had that all year long, as far as I know.
Yes, well, I'll get that for you, not a problem at all. I would say for
May
the,
I ask, Miranda, so getting that bi-monthly, help me understand, like, I haven't ever really,
But don't you like
used
to
that
see
as a
Don't you
tool.
like to see the trends in your schools? Like if you had, say, 8th grade, they lost 50 students.
So that's the
Your
way that you
students.
used it, I'm just trying to understand
Yeah.
how you used it.
Yeah, we just always we always just tracked our enrollment numbers in our schools to see, because we're gonna lose teachers, gain teachers, what are we looking at, that kind of thing.
And so did you find that your schools had dramatic changes every 2 weeks?
Well, I mean,
You said bi-monthly,
Well,
so-
it's probably monthly, I don't know how often we used to get them. I
I
don't
know,
know. What difference does it make?
in the
Well, I was
past,
just
Once a month,
not-
I don't care, we haven't had one all year.
Well, I'm just trying to understand
At the
what the
beginning.
value of
Once a
every.
quarter, I don't care, I just like to see them.
I'll absolutely get them to you. I know in the beginning, that's a new
We, like I
expectation.
say, we never had to ask for them before, we just come to school board meeting and they were laying on our station, every time.
Well, we'll make sure they're laying on your station on Thursday night. I will say that
Color
since,
coded too, I don't like this just, we used to have them color coded, so it's very easy. I
Well,
mean, you have it in
we
the
will-
computer, because we had them forever.
we will,
I mean, it's
we
not like
will
you're having
get
to
you-
reinvent the wheel here.
we will get a color-coded version of enrollment numbers for each school. I will say this, I've been here 4 years, Rhonda, and since I've been here, we normally do 5, 10, then we do a 20-day. Once we got past that September 5th, I've never, in my 4 years, I've never had a request to provide it on a bi-monthly basis. That's an easy for me to do.
Okay.
I'm just saying,
sorry.
since I've been here 4 years, but I will absolutely, that's not a problem at all. That's an easy
'Cause
request,
I
and
would
we'll
like to see
absolutely do
what
it.
the numbers
It's not a
look like
problem.
at the end of this year. I would like to see what they look like at the beginning and the end of this year, but.
We've got it, we can
yeah.
pull it, we can show you beginning and end, and then also projections as well, because we use that for staffing. I mean, we
right.
try to be very pragmatic in what we do, so it's all based on the numbers.
Yeah.
One thing I was gonna say about legislation, and just very brief, generally what happens from a legislative standpoint, a lot of times what happens is, the state legislature sets that legislation, but then it goes to state board, state Department of Ed to develop rules, et cetera. So there's a lot of legislation that's come out, will come out, or has come out, that will have to have state board, or state department, setting rule and context around, how it's implemented. So this could be one, I think we were talking about how will the process work, this could be one that the state board, state Department of Ed ends up weighing in on to set some rules. I do know, what I read in brief when I saw the legislation come across is that the State Department at the time did not have a position on the legislation. I don't know what that means, but that's what the statement was at the time, and so they could adjust, but that's just some context.
All right. We are adjourned.